Hello, I'm Jill Martin, your host for Worth the Price of Admission. As a concert photographer, I had the incredible opportunity to capture unforgettable moments and connect personally with some of the most extraordinary people of our time. I'm deeply inspired by how individuals overcome obstacles to achieve their dreams. Join me as my guests reveal their unique journeys and untold stories, giving you an intimate look behind the scenes of their lives and explore the unforgettable experiences that have shaped who they are today. Each episode is crafted to inspire, educate, and entertain. So sit back and get ready. Every story is worth the price of admission. Good evening. I'm Jill Martin, and this is Worth the Price of Admission. Many of you have come to know me because I was married to baseball's one and only Billy Martin. When I was asked to begin my journey here at the Chapters Network, I shared with my audience I would have my guests tell Billy's story, how they personally experienced his and our life together. Also, to bring truth to some of what has been inaccurately written and spoken about. Tonight, I'm grateful for being given the opportunity to thank my guest personally after all these years and having him join me on my show. 34 years ago, on a cold winter night, a few days after Christmas, world-renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, with his expertise, helped me through an evening of real-life education, which enabled our family to bury my husband Billy when he found the truth. My husband died tragically Christmas Day, 1989. He was the passenger in his vehicle and was killed in the front of our driveway in Binghamton, New York, when his truck slid off the road and hit a culvert. Due to the overwhelming response for the public to honor my husband, a second wake was needed for people to pay their respects. At the end of the evening, our second wake at Frankie Campbell's funeral home in New York City, the late commentator Howard Cosell had just finished giving a eulogy for my husband. As people were beginning to leave, I was asked to come downstairs to the funeral offices. There was a problem. I was told the man driving Billy's truck, who was charged with a DUI, who was still in the hospital from his injuries, had changed his story, accusing Billy of driving when the accident occurred. The New York authorities wanted to take my husband's body for an autopsy. If I didn't agree, I ran the risk of having his body exhumed after burying him the next day at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. I was at the accident scene. I knew what had transpired. I knew he was the passenger. I stood my ground, and I was given legal counsel. After my refusal to release his body, I was asked if I would allow the New York forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, to come to the funeral home within the hour to verify the cause of death and determine if Billy's injuries were from driving or that of the passenger. I was also asked if I would accept his findings. Dr. Baden is here tonight to talk about that evening so long ago and to discuss how DNA eventually played a role in providing the truth about what happened. Dr. Baden will also discuss a little insight as to who he is and what he's been up to these past 34 years. Welcome, Michael.
It's great to see you, Jill.
After such a long time.
Yeah.
Could you share with us, Michael, how you came about to come to the funeral home that night?
Well, I was called about that evening when he was at Campbell's funeral home because I was the chief forensic pathologist at that time for the New York State Police. I had previously been the chief medical examiner in New York City. And there was an agreement among disputing people that I would be permitted to come down and examine Billy, who, as I grew up in Brooklyn, the only Yankee fan in the borough, I think, because I was born in the Bronx and moved to Brooklyn with my parents when I was about 3 years old. And I was a Yankee fan, and Joe DiMaggio and Billy Martin were my heroes at that time. And when I was called, I was asked if I'd respond to Campbell's funeral home, and did. And there were a number of Yankee prominent people there, including Steinbrenner, as I remember there, all concerned about his death and the issue that had come up, that was coming up, I learned, as to who was the driver. It's my experience as a forensic pathologist and other forensic pathologists and medical examiners that when there's a car accident and one person dies, the other person will automatically say that the dead person was the driver. That's sometimes true and sometimes not true. But that is one of the reasons that medical examiners have to be very careful in their findings as to how to identify drivers by the autopsy findings. And I did respond to the Campbell's funeral home, and it was apparent from examining Billy, if I may call him Billy, he's still
please, yes.
a wonderful person, and to my way of thinking, that he had a number of injuries on his right upper extremity, the right leg, which is characteristic usually of the passenger, somebody in the passenger seat, given the type of incident that happened when the car went in the culvert. He went to the right. The passenger would have gone to the right. And there were injuries in the body that made the fact that Billy was the passenger more likely. There was also hair found in the driver's windshield area that was going to be examined by the crime lab, the New York State Police crime lab, that didn't match Billy's hair, which I removed for this purpose. It physically did not match the hair that was in the windshield. I asked the authorities that under the circumstances, in order to really determine who the driver was, and I thought there was, my initial suspicions was that Billy was a passenger, but not provable, to examine the driver, Mr. Reedy, who was in hospital, see what his injuries were. And sometimes you can find injuries, certain impact injuries on from the driver's side that are different than the passenger side. And I remember going to the hospital a day or two later, and Reedy was up and walking around. He had a hospital gown on, very friendly. I sat him down and started to examine him, look at him over. And when the robe parted just the upper part of the body, there was an imprint of a steering wheel on his chest. He clearly had to have been the driver just on the basis of that, the impact of the time of he went down the culvert. And subsequently, as the DNA, this is just the beginning of DNA use, the examination of the hair turned out to match. The root of the hair has the DNA of the individual, the normal nuclear DNA of the individual that's present in all the cells, and that's at the root of the hair. And there were some roots of the hair on the windshield, and we were able to get Reedy to have some pulled hair that had roots of hair, and the hair matched under the microscope physically, and also the DNA showed that it was Reedy's hair on the driver's side of the windshield, and the steering wheel imprint on the front of the chest clearly established that Reedy was the driver, even though, as he remembered it, because he said he lost consciousness a little bit, that he was the passenger, he said, but it proved otherwise.
Yes, it did. And you brought a great deal of closure to our family and helped me get on with my life. And I'm very grateful.
Well, it was just an honor to meet you, Jill. You were just so strong during this whole trying time when your husband died, and the questions that come up that surprised you so that maybe Billy was the driver, which proved not to be so.
Thank you. So we clarified that. I'd like to talk a little bit about who you are, Michael, and where you came from and why you chose forensic pathology. Why did you?
Well, I started out actually to say something about that I was born in the Bronx.
Uh-huh.
And in those days, if you're born in the Bronx, you were a Yankee fan. It was stamped on your foot as you came out of your mother's womb. During the war, just before World War II, my father was an electrician who worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard building ships in World War II, and we moved to Brooklyn. And I found out very quickly that I was a distinct outsider because everybody else in Brooklyn were devoted, rabid Brooklyn Dodger fans. And so I grew up sort of as an outlier. My mother wanted me to be a doctor. And I remember in those days, doctors made house calls. And I remember getting sick a couple of times and a doctor coming over and examining me. One time they took out my tonsils on the kitchen table in those days.
Oh my gosh.
Which they thought was valuable. Now it turns out it's not a good thing to do. And he was a person I could admire. You know, he was in charge. He knew so much. So I was born and I went to school in Brooklyn, went to City College of New York, where I continued to have an interest in going to biology, chemistry, going to medicine. In those days, compared to now, biology and chemistry and physics were much simpler than they are today. And I did wind up going to NYU-Bellevue Medical School, initially wanting to be an internist, just see general people, see what the illness is, to make diagnosis and treatment, like my mother wanted me to be, her doctor as I got older. But when I was at NYU Medical School, the medical examiner's office was downstairs, down in the basement of Bellevue Hospital in those days. I had a patient as a first-year student. I did see a few patients who died, and I went down to see the autopsy. And the pathology residents and attendings at Bellevue would also have their autopsies done in the same autopsy room as the way the medical examiners were. And when I went down to see the patient who had died and was amazed, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in miracles and things. But in looking at the inside of a human body and doing an autopsy, it was just unbelievable how the trillions of cells in our body know where to go. We start out with that little one cell, one from the mom and one from the pop, and it develops into trillions of cells, and the heart cells know where to go, and the kidney cells know where to go, and the muscle cells know where to go, although they lost their way with me a little bit. But it's just the most amazing thing. And, people think about the wonders of the universe, and which we have, and how many universes are there, and the wonders of the body, just how the nerves know which muscles to go to, and how our eyes work, just miraculous to me. So I gained a very quick respect for the human body, and that got me interested in pathology. My mother didn't understand it. She assumed I was going to be a doctor that took care of people.
And we have to
How
listen to our mom and dad.
how could you be a doctor and not take care of people?
Right.
So just was by chance that I was at the NYU Medical Center. I remember the very first contact I had with a medical examiner was I went to the medical examiner's office to look at a patient who died, and there were a lot of attending doctors in white coats outside, wouldn't go into the autopsy room. And I had been there once before, and I asked, am I allowed in? And they say, you're allowed in, but you shouldn't go in. I said, why shouldn't I go in? Because the person, this is 1955, the person on the autopsy table looks like he died of smallpox. And if you go in, you can catch smallpox. And I thought to myself, but I got immunized. Everybody in my day got immunized to smallpox. I got these marks on the arm. And I said I would go in. And I went in, and there was an old guy, what at that time looked to me to be an old guy, somebody maybe in his 50s, who was doing an autopsy and needed movement of some lights, portable lights, so he could take better photographs of the body.
Certainly, yeah. Mhm.
All the bodies get photographed, which interested me also because I liked photography. And it turned out that old guy was the chief medical examiner, Milton Helpern, and he was all by himself there because nobody else would go near the body because they thought smallpox was bad, and I was stupid enough not to go along with it since I always did things that were different than other people, a little bit like somebody named Billy Martin, I think. And it's one of the reasons he attracted me so much because he was his own person. And I helped him with that. And it turned out it wasn't smallpox, which would have been a disaster because 8 years before, in 1947, in New York City, I remember getting on a line in a hospital. I went around the corner for smallpox, repeated smallpox vaccinations because somebody had come into New York City with smallpox, and about a dozen people had gotten smallpox in 1947 in New York City. And it was declared an emergency in New York City. It was before cell phones, so it was confined to New York City. The whole country didn't know about it. Not what Steve Jobs did, where everybody suddenly finds out everything right away. And I was on the line, I remember, and the whole city, 8 million people got vaccinated again because there were people walking around with smallpox, which is interesting to have that as the first real case. I had met Helpern. And after that, he took an interest in me, had me help in other cases, and that's what got me involved in
many cases to
forensic
follow. Yes.
forensic pathology. It turned out that what looked like smallpox was a variant of chickenpox, hemorrhagic chickenpox, that looks very much
Sure.
like smallpox. Under the microscope, there's a little bit of differences, but that took those days a few days till you got the microscopic findings. But there were about 3 days when the health department in New York City was getting ready to do another mass immunization, and it turned out it wasn't needed.
Well, there you go. What do your kids think about this? About their dad being a forensic pathologist?
My kids are interesting because I didn't want and to do anything to force them into any tell them what to do. Like my mother wanted me to be a doctor, and which I liked. And that time it was different because when I was at medical school, it was a calling to be a physician. And I looked at it that way. Now it's more of a business,
Sure.
unfortunately.
Mhm.
So I had a daughter first, son, and daughter.
Are they in the medical field?
Yes, they used to peek at my photographs that I'd study and work at home, and they like looking at photographs of dead bodies. And the oldest girl actually decided to become a physician and is a OBGYN doctor in Oakland, California. My firstborn son passed away from drug use. The next son is now a full professor of internal medicine at Harvard Medical School. Two people just got the Nobel Prize for developing the mRNA vaccine that was used for COVID. My son was in charge of the big research project at Harvard that proved that it worked. So he published a big paper on proof that the mRNA vaccinations prevented illness, hospitalizations, and deaths of people during the COVID thing. And my youngest daughter, a family physician who works in the Bronx, at Montefiore Hospital, in poor neighborhoods, trying to increase the health of.
So you passed along the gene.
Yeah, well,
You sure did, huh?
None of them went into pathology.
That's okay. Everybody's well-rounded.
But they did. They were just. They're terrific.
Does one case stand out more? You've done so many. I mean, how do we choose? How do we pick? Is there something that interested you in a case more than not, or was fascinating to you?
The different things. Obviously, some of the more famous cases have more implications. Like I was asked to be the chairman of the medical examiner unit of the Select Committee on Assassinations that reviewed and reinvestigated the deaths of President Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King. And of course, that is outstanding, and not only because of the importance of the decedents and significance, but also the controversies around their death as to whether how the president was shot, whether it's one shooter or two shooters.
Certainly.
And our conclusions of the unit, the Forensic Pathology Select Committee on Assassination, has stood up to 3 shots by Oswald from the building.
The building there, yeah.
And first miss, and one struck him, the president, in the back and went through him to Governor Connolly. And then the third bullet struck him in the head and caused his death. Now, that has importance as well as notoriety for the tragedy of the president. Same, there was concerns with Martin Luther King. But we learned that the one thing about doing autopsies is you always learn something from every autopsy. Everybody's different. We all have all these cells and circumstances, causes of death, all have variations.
Were you ever shocked by by what you found? Like there's something that stands out more than?
Yeah, as we're talking, what stands out, I remember at the very beginning, like when I started out in the medical examiner's office, one of my early cases, about 1970, in the Bronx, a 75-year-old man was accused of killing his 70-year-old wife by suffocating her with a pillow. In my youth then, when I thought 75 was old, I couldn't believe it. Why would a 75, and he didn't hide it. He suffocated his wife. She died. He called the police. They came. They arrested him, and the body came down. And while I was doing the autopsy, the 2 sisters of the decedent's 2 sisters, who were in their 70s, came to identify her. And I think, what a horrible situation this is going to be. They lost their sister, and that was in the background. And when I started the autopsy, even before showing the body to the sisters, I looked at the lungs and the windpipe, as always in an autopsy, when we start the autopsy. And the mouth, the windpipe, and the lung passages were filled with feathers. And that was the days when pillows were made with feathers in them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this 70-year-old woman had the whole air passages were filled with these feathers because the impact was so much of that the sheet had broken. And so that was what a horrible situation that was. I go in with the body covered up except for the face for identification by the next of kin to make sure the right body is given the right names. In those days, we had a small room, and we bring the body up and elevated area, opened the passageway. They looked at the face. I thought they were going to go out of their mind. One looked at the other and said, he should have done it 50 years ago. And that showed me immediately then, and many times otherwise. You never know what goes on in the family. You never know what happens. And one of the things about medical examiners,
Absolutely. Huh?
we certainly see unexpected things in the body and also in the relationships of people that are not known to others. It's very hard for me to know what I'm doing and the reasons I'm doing it, let alone somebody else.
What does your day consist of now?
Well, I'd worked initially 25 years in the medical examiner's office in New York City, then 25 years for the New York State Police, which was from 1985, started there 4 years before Billy passed away. And in the past 10 years or so, I've been doing private practice, lecturing, work, writing some books.
And you have one of those here with you today.
I happen to have that.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, this just recently, and this is sort of a calling, American Autopsy, and it's about the medical examiner's information that we get of people who die in police custody. Because one of the things in my learning is when I came in the medical examiner's office in New York City back in the late 60s, it was the good guys versus the bad guys. The police, the people we work with, the police all the time were the good guys. The defendant and the defense lawyers were trying to just poke holes to see if they can get away with something in the legal system. And after a while, and being involved in many cases that came along, I realized that sometimes the good guys who aren't good guys and the wrong people get convicted. In homicide cases, in child abuse cases, and that there's really a structural problem, a racist structural problem in our criminal justice system as seen from a medical examiner point of view, and that we're part of the problem. It isn't just police, rogue police and prosecutors who can sometimes get the wrong person convicted, but it's also the medical examiner who makes the decisions. Like we have many medical examiners refer to babies as shaken baby syndrome, in which the last person with the baby shook the baby, intentionally causing the head injury. That's not based on science. Accidental falls can do the same things, and babies sometimes die accidentally, and it's converted into a homicide by a wrong diagnosis by the medical examiner using diagnoses like shaken baby.
So we'll go to a lighter note. What makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh?
Yes.
Not doing autopsies. Things I have sometimes stories are told about death that are funny.
Okay.
There are good things that I'm told by older people. Like when I first started, the very first time I was going to go testify, I was very nervous. And an old-timer, an old medical examiner said, all you need is to obey 3 rules. So this is not funny, but it's
right.
3 rules. One is listen to the question. I understand. Listen to the question. Second rule is answer the question. And the third rule is don't volunteer. They don't teach you in medical school not to volunteer. They teach us in medical school, explain everything to the patient, go through the whole thing. Just don't. And when you do that on the stand, you get in a lot of trouble. So that's a troublesome thing. And troublesome for me and other medical examiners is we volunteer stuff that confuses the jury. And we're trying to give our explanation, which may or may not be appropriate, true. So the jury is very important.
What do you do in your spare time with your wife, Linda?
Well, my wife's an attorney, and I must say, most of my spare time right now has been trying to figure out how these devices work. The new devices. Every time there's a new device,
or an upgrade,
or any kind of upgrade, we spend time trying to figure it out.
Already figured it out.
She's much better at it than I am. But when I grew up, my brother and I spent most of our time, apart from being Yankee fans, with playing tennis, because you just needed two people to play tennis. So he and I could go in the park, and we didn't have to pay for the court. Paid $5 a year to use a court. And we played a lot of chess in those days. But as I got older, I just continually liking to do work in my field. And one of the things, as I mentioned in my book, is to discuss how we can develop ways to prevent deaths during police encounters, which we learn as medical examiners, and that there are a number of misconceptions that police have. There's a kind of diagnosis that's been created called excited delirium, that when somebody dies during police encounters, a lot of my colleagues will use the term excited delirium to cause death, with the idea being that during the encounter with the police and struggle with police, the body produces too much adrenaline, causes the person to die of natural causes, when in fact the death is caused by the pressure put on their back that prevents them from breathing.
Did you ever take a case that you regretted taking?
Of course, there are times when the family is very upset at the results of the autopsies and the cause of death on the death certificate, especially in the situation when we make diagnoses of suicide. Often that can be very disturbing for a family. I will try to sit down, talk, explain everything, but we can't make diagnoses just to make somebody happy or to please somebody. There's political reasons to do it, medical reasons to do it, and somebody doing research on something needs a certain diagnosis. We can't, or the politics, or the families, and we have to be able to make the diagnosis on the basis of the science. We cannot do it to harm or help one side of another, because often there are two different sides or more to the interests of society or the families as to cause of death. And also, what hurts me is talking about child abuse, that when there are bad diagnoses made, like assuming that somebody who falls down, gets a head injury, didn't die of a fall, but died because the parent or the babysitter shook the baby too hard, and which I think is junk science, shaken baby syndrome. But I'll testify that's junk science and that the person really died of an accidental fall and not for an intentional shaking. And juries will, we're one of 30 witnesses perhaps, and juries make decisions unpredictably, often in my mind. And when I see that, what I feel that the science shows that the jury made a wrong decision with the cause of an innocent person being convicted of murder, that happens all too often. And also when people die in police encounters, and the wrong diagnosis is made without being able to improve conditions.
And where do you think our world is today?
I think our world is, some of it is based on medicine, science, physics is changing so rapidly, just like my grandchildren are trying to teach me how to use artificial intelligence. They're very good at it.
How many do you have?
I have 4 grandchildren,
Okay.
and they all know more about artificial intelligence and cell phones and devices than I do, and they'll come over and help and try to teach me a little bit about it. But it's happening so fast that I think that part of the world now is in silos. It's my side versus the other side, you know. In the old days, I was never into politics very much, but being a Republican or Democrat didn't mean you couldn't be friends or anything at all. And one of the things that came up with the COVID whole crisis of how this silo existence has created a monster. It doesn't matter what the science is. You're either with us or against us. You're either in favor of vaccinations or against vaccinations, regardless of the merits. So we have situations now where people aren't getting vaccinated for illnesses that could cause the babies to die. We're starting out with the COVID stuff. When I was a kid and had to take a smallpox vaccination back in 1947, when the whole city of New York had to take, everybody went. There wasn't, and it stopped the spread of the smallpox immediately. Whereas now, from where I sit and have some knowledge, the backlash against science is very threatening to all kinds of things, where quack cures become more celebrated than good science. And it doesn't matter what's good or bad, as long as I like that side. That's with me. I'm on that side no matter what they think.
Okay, exactly. So you've been with us on this earth for a very long time. What do you think your greatest accomplishment has been that you think?
Oh, I think that what I do is important as a medical examiner, thousands of autopsies and diagnosis. Remember, when we do an autopsy, we do it, one, to be able to tell the family things, why their loved one died, whether it's genetic or not, how that knowledge can be helpful for them to avoid the death. But also, it's something important for society, where if we identify the right decedent and the right perpetrator, then society can try and get the bad people off the street or something, or be corrected. Which reminds me of the time, true story, when the very religious Jews in New York City often are opposed to autopsies. A rabbi was shot in the East Village in New York City, came to the medical examiner's office, and when I came in the morning, down on 30th Street and First Avenue by Bellevue Hospital, there was a crowd, a couple of hundred Hasidic Jewish people dressed in garb around the medical examiner's office. They didn't want an autopsy for the religion opposed an autopsy for the of the rabbi. I told him, look, in order to be able to see why he died and who did it, we'd have to get the bullet from the body to match it to whatever the weapon of the person. And they decided to have about a 12-member committee come in with me around the table in the medical examiner's office for me to explain to them why we have to do an autopsy and why they should not obstruct it. And the chief rabbi was at one end of the table, And when he stood up, he was the same height as when he sat down. He was a very short guy, but he was very learned and very outspoken. And he asked me, he said, "When don't you do an autopsy?" I said, "Well, when the person dies of natural causes, we don't have to do an autopsy." So he stands up and he says, "Well, Rabbi Schwartz, he was shot in the head. He died. Naturally, he died." And thought that was the end of it. But he agreed to let us take out the bullet and all that. And they caught the guy who did it. When I testified in the trial a year or two later, the room was filled with the Hasidic people in their garb, the courtroom, which I don't know why they were there. And when I testified, and I testified on how they were able to catch the killer because of the autopsy, they stood up and applauded. And that taught me a little bit about silo thinking also.
Your wife is a lawyer. Does she ever help you with any of this, the cases? Or?
She doesn't get involved in the cases, but sometimes she gets involved with giving me advice in what I can say and can't say.
It kind of happens in a marriage.
No, but legally what I can say, like she would be horrified if I said anything about a goat.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Please.
So do you have a role model at your age?
Interesting question. It's interesting. If I think of people that I admire most, it's really my kids. And my role model is my Harvard professor who helped create the validity of the COVID vaccine that saved millions of lives. He teaches, he does research, the kind of thing at the one school I would have liked to go to medical school, which I was rejected from, in
And why were you
1940.
rejected?
Because they didn't take Jewish people in those days. But it was interesting. Harvard, Columbia, Cornell schools back in the 40s, after World War II, still had policies to restrict the number of Jews that got into medical school. I remember Cornell took one Jewish student, Columbia two, so I thought Columbia was much better than, I didn't fight it or think that we should say anything. I was just grateful that they took even one or two people. So that he's accomplished things that an editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the foremost medical journal in the world. And it's amazing when your children do better things than you did. See, on the opposite end of the spectrum, with people who have no doctors in the poor section of the Bronx, as an attending doctor at Montefiore Hospital. And then Trissa, who's in Oakland and fighting for the ability that women should be able to do whatever they want with their bodies medically, and very much delivering babies, and very much opposed to a lot of things going on, making her oppositions well known, that the widespread anti-abortion
Do they call you for
laws.
advice, your children, through their medical travels?
When they were young, they would, but not now. Well, I call them for advice. I call them for advice, and I think that.
Well, that's a compliment. Yes.
No, they're terrific, and it's amazing how, as I get older as a doctor, I need more and more advice. I knew everything when I finished medical school and residency and internship about medicine and about pathology and forensic pathology, but not now. Things have changed so much in medicine that so much new things have come in, not so much in pathology, because the autopsy is the same thing. We can do more with DNA at a time of an autopsy, but in general, in medicine, things have so changed that the surgery, the internal medicine diagnoses, the radiology, X-ray techniques are so advanced that they were beyond my knowledge. Now I have to rely on my kids to know what's going on.
So, did you ever work overseas with the medical needs there?
Yeah, yes, I did. I was over a couple of times to Iraq, testify at court martials when a soldier was accused of improperly killing somebody who they thought was an enemy agent by mistake and killed an innocent person, and had to go down and testify in the middle of Iraq, going down to Camp Liberty, I think it was, and looking out of my little place where I could sleep and seeing a big McDonald's hamburger place, in the middle of it, were very popular. Yeah, and I've had chances. I've given lectures and spent a few months in Singapore, just teaching students in Kuwait about
You did that
forensic
in English?
pathology. Yes, yes,
Okay.
in Israel, Kuwait, Ecuador, Colombia, lots of places around, because there's a universal interest in forensic pathology.
Well,
But
that's just amazing. And Dr. Baden, I could sit here and talk to you for hours about so many different things. And I just want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for helping me get on with my life and helping so many others. You're known around the world for giving your advice and bringing closure to people. And I thank you, sir.
thank you, Jill. Thank you very much for having me here.
You're so welcome.
You're terrific.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank BarksNet once again for this fabulous studio and the good crew and allowing us to be here today. Thank you. This has been Jill Martin with Worth the Price of Admission.